The crystal chandelier cast dancing shadows across the polished mahogany table, each flicker highlighting another empty chair. Margaret Holloway sat at the head of the dining table in her Pacific Heights mansion, her silver fork moving mechanically from plate to mouth as the grandfather clock in the hallway marked another solitary dinner. 8073. Margaret had everything money could buy, original Monets on her walls, a wine cellar that made collectors weep with envy, and enough stock portfolios to support a small nation. What she didn't have was someone to share it with. Her husband, Gerald, had died 15 years ago. They'd never had children, his choice, one she'd eventually accepted, but never quite forgiven. Will that be all, Mrs. Holloway? Asked Patricia, her housekeeper of 20 years, hovering in the doorway. Yes, thank you, Patricia. Margaret's voice was soft, refined, carrying the weight of too many silent meals. As Patricia retreated to the kitchen, Margaret heard something unusual: laughter. Real, uninhibited, joyful laughter. It had been so long since such a sound had echoed through these halls that she almost didn't recognize it. She rose from her chair, curiosity overcoming her usual reserve, and followed the sound to the kitchen. There she found Patricia's 12-year-old grandson, Daniel, sitting at the kitchen table with a textbook spread before him, giggling at something on his phone. Daniel looked up, his brown eyes widening with surprise. Oh. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to disturb you. You didn't disturb me, Margaret said, though she remained in the doorway, uncertain. What's so amusing? Just a video my friend sent about chemistry experiments gone wrong. I'm studying for a science test tomorrow. He gestured at his textbook sheepishly. My mom had to work a double shift at the hospital, so Grandma said I could do homework here. Margaret nodded stiffly and turned to leave, but something made her pause. Chemistry, you said? Yes, It's my favorite subject. Well, it would be if I was better at it. Against every instinct that told her to maintain proper boundaries, Margaret found herself saying, I minored in chemistry at Radcliffe. Perhaps I could help. Daniel's face lit up like a sunrise. Really? That would be amazing. And so began the most unexpected chapter of Margaret Holloway's carefully ordered life. Over the following weeks, Margaret found reasons to be in the kitchen when Daniel arrived. What started as occasional tutoring sessions became regular occurrences. Daniel would arrive after school, and Margaret would help him with his homework while Patricia prepared dinner. You're a natural teacher, Mrs. Holloway, Daniel said one evening, finally understanding electron configurations after Margaret explained them using a model she'd sketched on paper. I considered teaching once, Margaret admitted, surprising herself with the confession. Before I married Gerald. His family didn't think it was appropriate for a Holloway wife to work. That's sad, Daniel said with the blunt honesty of youth. You're really good at explaining things. Something warm unfurled in Margaret's chest, something she thought had died with Gerald, hope, perhaps, or purpose. Would you like to stay for dinner? The words escaped before she could stop them. Daniel looked uncertain. I usually eat in the kitchen with Grandma, I meant both of you. At the dining table. It's far too large for one person anyway. Patricia appeared in the doorway, having overheard. Mrs. Holloway, we couldn't, I insist. Please. That evening, for the first time in 15 years, Margaret's dining room felt alive. Daniel peppered her with questions about her travels, her education, her life. Margaret found herself sharing stories she'd locked away, about studying in Boston, about her brief rebellion against her family's expectations, about dreams deferred. You should come to my science fair next month. Daniel said enthusiastically. I'm building a model of the solar system with working orbits. I'd be honored, Margaret said, and meant it, but not everyone was pleased with this new arrangement. Gerald's nephew, Christopher Holloway, had been circling Margaret like a shark for years, waiting for her to become confused enough, lonely enough, or desperate enough to sign over power of attorney. At 47, Christopher had never held a real job, living off a modest trust fund and increasingly desperate schemes to access his late uncle's fortune. He'd noticed the change in his aunt immediately. She seemed lighter, more engaged. When he stopped by for one of his calculated visits, he found her in the garden with some kid, examining soil pH for a science project. Aunt Margaret, might I have a word? In private. In her study, Christopher didn't waste time with pleasantries. I'm concerned about this boy spending so much time here. What do you really know about him? About his family? Margaret's spine stiffened. Patricia has worked for me for 20 years. Her daughter is a nurse. Her grandson is a bright, polite young man. These people see an opportunity, Aunt Margaret. A wealthy, elderly woman living alone. They're taking advantage of your kindness. These people. Margaret's voice could have frozen fire. You'll watch your tone in my home, Christopher. I'm thinking of your welfare. Uncle Gerald would want me to protect you. Gerald is dead, and I'm perfectly capable of protecting myself. This conversation is over. But Christopher wasn't finished. He began appearing more frequently, always with thinly veiled warnings about fortune hunters and inappropriate attachments. He started copying Margaret's financial statements without permission, building a case that she was becoming incompetent. Then he played his trump card. Margaret received the letter from Christopher's attorney 3 weeks before Daniel's science fair. It was a petition to the court for a competency hearing, filled with allegations that she was being manipulated by her household staff, that she was making irrational financial decisions, that she needed a conservator, specifically, Christopher, to manage her affairs. Patricia found her sitting at her desk, the letter trembling in her hands. "Mrs. Holloway. Are you all right?" "I'm so sorry, Patricia. I never thought," Margaret's voice broke. "Christopher's filed for conservatorship. He's claiming you're taking advantage of me." Patricia's face went pale. "Oh no. Mrs. Holloway, we should go. Daniel and I will find somewhere else." "Absolutely not." Steel entered Margaret's voice. "I won't let that parasitic weasel drive away the only joy I've found in years. But I also won't put you in the crossfire. I have a plan, but I'll need your trust." The hearing was set for the Thursday after Daniel's science fair. Margaret attended the fair as promised, watching Daniel's face glow with pride as he explained his project to judges and visitors alike. But her mind was already on the courtroom, on the battle to come. On Wednesday evening, she called a family meeting in her study, something she'd never done before. "Daniel," she said, as the boy sat nervously beside his grandmother and mother, Cheryl, whom Margaret had invited specifically for this. "I need to tell you something. My nephew is trying to have me declared incompetent. He's using our friendship as evidence that I'm not thinking clearly." Daniel's eyes filled with tears. "Because of me. Mrs. Holloway, I'm so sorry." "Hush, child. You have nothing to apologize for. You've given me something I thought I'd lost forever." She turned to Cheryl. "Your son reminds me what it means to have family. Real family. Not the kind you're born into, but the kind you choose." She slid a document across the desk. "I've had my attorney draw up papers establishing an educational trust for Daniel. It will cover his tuition through medical school. Yes, I know about your dream of becoming a pediatrician and provide a stipend for books and living expenses. The trust is irrevocable and untouchable by anyone else, including Christopher." Cheryl gasped. "Mrs. Holloway, we can't accept, you can and you will. Because I'm also appointing you, Cheryl, and Patricia as co-trustees. You'll manage the funds and ensure they're used properly. Christopher will have no access, no control. Nothing. But your nephew will use this as more evidence," Patricia began. Margaret smiled, and there was something fierce in it. "Let him try." The courtroom was smaller than Margaret expected, less dramatic. But the stakes couldn't have been higher. Christopher's attorney painted a picture of a lonely, confused elderly woman, isolated and vulnerable to manipulation. He presented financial records showing erratic, charitable donations. Margaret had been giving more to the children's hospital where Cheryl worked. He described how she'd been spending less time with appropriate companions, meaning Christopher, and more with household staff. "Your Honor," the attorney concluded, "Mrs. Holloway needs protection from those who would exploit her generosity. She's clearly not thinking rationally." Then it was Margaret's attorney's turn, Harold Chen, a sharp-minded lawyer who'd been handling her affairs for 30 years. "Your Honor, I'd like to call Mrs. Holloway to testify." Margaret took the stand with her back straight, her voice clear. "Mrs. Holloway," Harold began, "can you explain to the court your recent activities?" "I've been tutoring a young man named Daniel Williams in chemistry and mathematics. I've been having dinner with him and his grandmother, my housekeeper, rather than eating alone. I've been attending his school events. And I've established an educational trust to help him achieve his dreams of becoming a doctor. And are you aware of what you're doing? Are these decisions you've made freely?" "More freely than any decisions I've made in decades," Margaret said firmly. 4 years after my husband died, I went through the motions of living. I managed my investments, maintained my property, fulfilled my social obligations. But I wasn't truly alive. Daniel reminded me what it means to have purpose beyond accumulation." She turned to look directly at Christopher. "My nephew claims I need protection. The truth is, I need protection from him. He's never visited me without asking about my will. He's never called without some scheme to access Gerald's money. The real fortune hunter in this courtroom is wearing a $1,000 suit." Harold produced bank records. "Your Honor, you'll see that Mrs. Holloway's financial management has actually improved over the past months. Her portfolio has grown. Her charitable giving, while increased, represents less than 3% of her annual income. She's had no cognitive decline according to the independent evaluation we commissioned. The only irrational thing here is Mr. Christopher Holloway's claim that a woman showing kindness to a child must be incompetent." The judge reviewed the documents, then fixed Christopher with a stern gaze. "Mr. Holloway, this petition appears to be motivated not by concern for your aunt's welfare, but by your desire to access her estate. I'm not only denying your petition, I'm ordering you to pay Mrs. Holloway's legal fees and prohibiting you from filing any similar actions without substantial new evidence of incapacity. Furthermore, I'm issuing a restraining order requiring you to stay at least 500 feet from Mrs. Holloway unless she specifically invites your presence. Christopher's face went purple, but the gavel had already fallen. That evening, Margaret hosted what she declared would be the first of many family dinners, not just Patricia, Daniel, and Cheryl, but also Patricia's other grandchildren, Cheryl's husband Marcus, and even Harold Chen and his wife. The dining room that had echoed with emptiness for so many years now rang with laughter, with debates over homework, with plans for the future. Mrs. Holloway, Daniel said as dessert was being served, I got the results from my science fair. I got second place. Second place. That's wonderful. But why don't you look happier? Daniel grinned. Because the girl who got first place. She's in 10th grade. I got second place as a 7th grader. My teacher says if I keep working hard, I could win next year. Then we'd better get started on an even better project, Margaret said, feeling that unfamiliar warmth in her chest again. Not hope this time. Something deeper, more permanent. Love. That night, after everyone had gone home and Patricia was cleaning up, Margaret stood in her dining room, looking at the chairs that had been filled with life and love. Mrs. Holloway. Patricia appeared in the doorway. I wanted to thank you. For everything. For fighting for us. You have it backwards, Patricia. You and your family fought for me. You reminded me that family isn't about blood or obligation. It's about showing up, about caring, about choosing each other every single day. Daniel's been asking if he can call you something besides Mrs. Holloway. Something that feels more like family. Margaret felt tears prick her eyes for the first time in years. Like what? He suggested Grandma Margaret. If that's not too presumptuous. Margaret Holloway, who'd spent 15 years believing her life was over, who'd given up on ever knowing what it meant to be called Grandma, smiled through her tears. That sounds perfect. 3 years later, Margaret Holloway attended Daniel's high school graduation, sitting in the front row with Patricia, Cheryl, and Marcus. As Daniel crossed the stage to accept the science department's highest honor, he caught Margaret's eye and mouthed 2 words, thank you. Margaret had rewritten her will, not out of spite for Christopher, but out of love for her chosen family. The bulk of her estate would endow a scholarship fund for promising young scientists from underprivileged backgrounds. Daniel's trust remained secure. And Patricia, Cheryl, and their family would be taken care of for generations. But more than money or trusts, or legal documents, Margaret had gained something infinitely more valuable. A reason to come down to breakfast every morning, a phone that rang with calls asking for advice, a house that felt like a home. She'd learned that it's never too late to build a family, that love comes in unexpected packages, and that the greatest fortune isn't what you accumulate, it's what you share. And every evening, when she sat down at her dining table surrounded by the voices of her chosen family, Margaret Holloway smiled, knowing she was finally, truly, wealthy.